This episode of The Watch is brought to you by Coffee Mate. Coffee Mate has been searching the globe for flavors that pair perfectly with coffee. So when they heard the new season of HBO's original series, The White Lotus, was set in Thailand, they were inspired to brew up 2 new flavored creamers, Thai iced coffee and pina colada flavored creamers. They're available for a short time only, so for the love of coffee, go try them now.
I need support staff to clear the room. Stand up and walk, now.
Hello, and welcome to The Watch. My name is Chris Ryan. I am an editor at TheRinger.com, and joining me in the studio, we all have our Achilles heel. It's Andy Greenwald!
Big Monday.
What's going on, buddy?
Look, Adolescence, White Lotus, Severance, big TV show, but big TV show Monday.
Yeah, big TV show
But
Monday.
I wanted to wish you, and particularly half of you, a happy St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, thanks. The good half.
The half that keeps it real.
You know that's the
even.
Goodfellas thing, right? I'm not making any kind of like weird gesture.
It was noted.
Yeah.
It was noted. It's kind of a sensitive
Do you
time.
I had a St. Patrick's Day celebration on Friday. Today I am celebrating St. Patrick's Day.
What did you do on Friday to celebrate it?
I had a Guinness and then a harp.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So that's just you in a nutshell. Both sides in it. All beers matter. It was beautiful.
I thought that's what this country was all about. Maybe I'm wrong.
Do you know? I did want to ask you if you were having a similar experience because, generally, even before we started recording today, we were talking about how much fun we both have on the internet, just with what's serviced to us and how things are cool. But I'm here to talk about the good things, and one of the good things in my life now is that because of my recent travels and my interest in my time in London, is I just now get serviced. I think I now have the CR feed, because all I get serviced to me are like Instagram accounts called like Creamy Guinness. And it's just like, the best pint of Guinness in London is found here. And, it's just like they go to another place called like the Old Shillelagh.
Yeah.
And then it's just people being like, do you see that? Do you see the way it kisses the glass? And I have to say, I'm very affected by this.
Yes.
It looks amazing.
Yeah.
All the pubs are great. I miss them very much. But I am also wondering, feel free to jump in with your thoughts on the Old Shillelagh, or maybe we'll just go back next time we're both there.
I was a fan of the Toucan, was my Guinness spot.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, a lot of content from the Devonshire,
Yes.
which I think we've both been to. But
a lot of dudes with industry vests standing outside the Devonshire.
A lot of other dudes there too. When we were there as dudes, we did not stand out.
Yeah.
I guess the thing that I'm asking you about is then your experience with the world.
Okay.
And you're an aesthete. You enjoy.
We're going to talk about that when it comes to Adolescence as well.
Christ.
Yeah.
Jesus, I'm stalling. Again, this is like years too late, but I'm now thinking about it, so I'm talking about it. But like Guinness is one of those things that is undeniably a great thing in the world and delicious. But also it looks really good on Instagram.
Beautiful.
And I'm wondering if you are ever finding yourself falling down in the uncanny valley between how good people holding things up on Reels looks and what the reality is. Because, there are other things that look good on the internet too, like cheesesteaks. I'm getting serviced a lot of like cheesesteak influencer content. And they're like, oh yeah, look at that. And they like break the cheesesteak in half and like hold it up. And they're like, I'm at Old Pat's on Conshohocken.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, I've driven past that place 100 times. It's probably good.
Sure.
But what's the ceiling here? But on Instagram, when you get in, the camera's in on the juices and the Cooper, the Cooper Sharp flowing.
Oh yeah, when the original gemstone is just slapping together a cheesesteak.
That Cooper.
I don't want to delay too long because we actually don't have that long today.
I know, I'm stalling so we don't have enough time to talk about Severance.
I am currently being served a ton of Japanese, like nighttime in Japan content.
We switched identities.
So it's lots of like, the like empty bar packed, like alleys full of bars that are seemingly empty at 1 a.m. or whatever. And then Blade Runner music playing under it. And I'm just like, this is literally the fucking best cinema I've ever seen in my life.
But do you remember?
There's no way this can be as cool as it looks. And there's just like a guy smoking a cigarette. It's just so good.
During the pandemic when we did the podcast remotely, we were doing it on Zoom, and I was spending a lot of time driving. I had my separate office then that I had rented in Hollywood right near where we used to. Here we go. You're giving me shit about that. off mic, you've been giving me some troubles about that. I brilliantly rented
Every
an
time
office.
I'm like, oh, I bought a DVD, and he's like, must be nice.
Yeah, you're like, I had a cold glass of Sprite the other day. I'm like, well.
Mr. Monopoly.
Good to be king. I rented an office next to where we recorded the podcast for many years.
Yes,
in
maybe
anticipation.
financially not your best decision.
Well, no, not just that, financially, but like in terms of just location.
Yeah, because I was like, you could just stroll over.
I would just stroll over.
Yeah.
Never recorded there again.
Yeah.
Anyway, I did spend much of that time, working on scripts, but also watching just YouTube videos of people taking night ferries to Hokkaido. So I do think something has switched with us, because that is great content.
Can we take a night ferry to Doncaster right now?
Okay. All right. I see you're all business, but
I just want to get this out on the record. I've basically since Friday night been dying to do this podcast with you, and I was basically going to do it by myself if you hadn't watched this.
Is that why you kept your distance at dinner on Saturday? you just wanted to I don't want to.
I think if I remember correctly, we did have dinner on Saturday, and at the end of it, I came up to you and was just like, "Adolescence makes the pit look like Friends." Have fun tomorrow.
Yeah.
Adolescence is a show on Netflix. It's 4 episodes. It comes from Jack Thorne, who is an incredibly prolific English writer who has done things on the sort of mainstream end as big as Harry Potter and the Cursed Child on stage.
Oh, do you know about that?
And the Stranger Things play and tons of like big screen adaptations, but is also incredibly dedicated to writing social realism TV, just making limited series that tackle issues that he is interested in England. Yeah. He collaborated with the actor Stephen Graham, who is also seen on screen right now in 1,000 Blows, which me and Manzukis talked about a couple of weeks ago, and we still have not hit. But I know you've checked out.
He also had another Rip from the Headlines miniseries on Netflix last month.
Yes.
With Robert Carlyle and White Lotus's Amy Lou Wood.
Yeah.
Very prolific.
Yeah. So he is an incredibly prolific writer who has tackled a lot of big issues in his time. I'm like pretty familiar with him. I know he's got a start on Skins. You know, he is kind of like in the one-man industry, Russell Davies, Taylor Sheridan kind of like.
Can I just put a personal opinion in and say, to hear the reverence with which you were speaking about a guy who has managed to balance personal projects with Harry Potter is really inspiring.
Yeah, well, you're seen.
I thank you. Thank you for that.
People, I think if you were online at all this weekend, or if you checked out Netflix this weekend, you probably couldn't have missed some mention of Adolescence. It's gotten very, 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 very strong reviews. It is the #1 show on Netflix currently.
Is it?
And I'll say this. For my part, within a few moments of this show starting, and I've finished it, this is why I watch television and why I podcast about TV.
Yeah.
I feel like this happens once a year if you're lucky, maybe twice if you're having a great year. Obviously, Andy and I love talking about all the traditional networks, their big stars on their big shows that we kind of have anticipated and gotten prepared for, and we know White Lotus is coming, or we know Last of Us is coming, or we know Industry is coming back, and we're ready and we're ready and ready. But Industry is a really good example of a show like this, where sometimes you turn on your TV and it takes flight, and like you get introduced to people that you haven't met before. Jack Thorne has a off-quoted aphorism about television being an empathy box. This idea that you can, over the course of these long-form stories, find humanity in people that you haven't met before, that you may be like in issues that you aren't familiar with or don't really have time to unpack at the level of these shows do. And I was absolutely floored by this on every level, not only as like a person who is horrified by like what's happening in the world, but also like as a person who just wants to see incredible work being done. Shout out to Netflix for putting this out. I'm so happy this is a big hit. It's my favorite thing I've seen this year.
Wow.
Astonishing. So we can talk a little bit about, I know you saw the first episode. Take me through how you're feeling about it.
Yeah, so I would say thank you for the strong shove. Thanks to our buddy Tyler for paying my valet, but the same moment you were telling me about this, but I think it worked out for all of us, maybe not him. I did watch the first episode.
Yeah.
I will be watching the next 3 episodes, maybe in time for our second show of the week, but this is a chance to sort of get people amped up about it. I'll come out and say the obvious thing first. This was This is not Hereditary.
Yeah.
You were treating me with kid gloves to the point where I do appreciate this.
Yeah, I was like, if you don't want to watch it, I understand because of like what this is about. We'll get into that.
So, but it is not that. My perception of this show, even just from a few headlines, a few social media things, was that it was going to be an absolute meat grinder of an experience emotionally, because it is about a child both in peril and potentially a child who is capable of great violence. It's about a kid who is, in the opening moments of the first episode, accused of a hideous crime. And it follows in tracking shots what happens next procedurally.
It's a series of one
and emotionally.
Shot, yeah.
It is. I was, for whatever reason, there were certain buzzwords or a sense of it. I thought that it was actually like a tracking the act of violence as opposed to what happens afterwards, and what sort of support net, safety net, cultural net is there to catch when things like this occur. I found it absolutely riveting and emotionally engaging, but I did not find it painful to watch. It is not that. So I feel like if there's anyone who listens who's like me, I don't know there is. But,
yeah, I've had a bunch of friends who are just like, I got to tap out just based on like what the log line is. Yeah.
And at least through one, and that could change. I did not find that to be the case. I found it to be so, this is a strange thing to say about a television show, but plain spoken. The camera is turned on, and as you said, the camera does not turn off. I'll also say, as someone who is often on the microphone of this podcast, speaking against bold aesthetic directorial choices, this is the most unobtrusive oneer I could possibly imagine. I definitely was watching to see like where the sneaky cuts were.
Sure.
I don't know if there were any.
I mean, you can see behind the scenes videos of them like attaching a cameraman holding a camera, and then the camera is also on a drone, and he lets go of the camera,
and it follows.
And they done, there's a scene in the second episode where they go through a window, and it's like, I don't really know how that happened.
Let's say this instead, that like often, particularly I want to say in television, when you see an auteurish tracking shot, that can be a sometimes fatal or sometimes just distracting misallocation of resources.
Yeah.
Not just that the director or whomever is doing something like purely for ego. It's just that successful television productions are equal-footed collaborations between so many departments, and when you sort of mess with that ratio, things can tip. And what's beautiful about this show, through one, is that it feels like a really, really, really grounded and empathetic and inclusive collaboration between Jack Thorne, who you mentioned, Stephen Graham, who is the hardest working man in show business at this point, who is the actor and also the co-writer and co-creator with Jack Thorne, and Philip Barantini, who is the director, who did this type of show with Stephen Graham on Boiling Point, a show that I've talked briefly about before. This feels like incredibly creative people at the height of their technical and empathetic powers being like, let's all walk in the same direction towards an investigation of a thing.
Yeah, so you would be well within your rights to say, why does it need to be one take, or why do these need to be one-er shots? And there is it's a formal gambit that actually defines the experience of watching the show. And it also informs how you process the information that you're being given. To use the first episode as an example. So what happens is it opens, and a 13-year-old boy is arrested and accused of murder by the English police. So he's taken into a station, and because we're never cutting, you are in the van with the kid as he rides to the station. You go through the mundanity of like all the paperwork that has to be done, all the questions that need to be asked, all the questions that need to be repeated. And then the slow process of the family arriving, a lawyer being brought in as a public defender, and we follow the police as they are also chatting about this. And the thing that I think I started to feel as we went on is, first of all, the dissonance between something being the worst thing that's ever happened in their families' lives together to a Tuesday for the other people in the building.
Yep.
The different levels of emotional engagement that different people in the criminal justice system have with what's happening. So obviously on the family level, it's like utter heartbreak and confusion and desperation. But for the public defender, it's kind of like, I'm here to do a job. I'm not going to sugarcoat what's going on with you, but I'm also like, I need to go do my paperwork and I need to go grab a coffee and I need to go do this.
And for what it's worth, that collision is also what powers the pit in a really compelling way. The collision between slightly hardened, varying degrees of hardened professionals and people who have suddenly gone through the looking glass into a world that they never expected to be in at 6 a.m.
Yeah, so I don't want to give away too much about the show because I think it's something that I want people to discover. And frankly, I'm glad I didn't read much about it as I watched because the third episode especially was so astonishing that I'm glad I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
I will say that Aaron Doherty, who's also in 1,000 Blows,
With
makes
Stephen
an appearance
Graham.
on the third episode of this show and is, making a case for having one of the great acting years on TV in a long time between 1,000 Blows and this. I was curious how you felt about where the first episode ended up. So for spoilers for the first episode,
even light spoilers.
Yeah,
I would
light
say.
spoilers, but I think it's important because obviously, like as an audience, we are put more or less in the POV of the family for much of the first episode.
Yeah,
their confusion, their clinging to this idea that their child is innocent, that this is some sort of mistake, and then by the end of the episode, the father, the son, Jamie, the father played by Stephen Graham named Eddie, are two police officers played by Ashley Walters, who people may recognize from Top Boy.
Or from So Solid Crew.
That's right.
I did not know that. He's awesome.
Faye Marseille, who is obviously in Game of Thrones.
And Andor.
They present the evidence starting with some feels somewhat circumstantial up into video evidence of this child.
England's reputation for being a CCTV kind of country is
a
lot of footage of me buying Haribos.
This kid killing a young girl with a knife.
Yeah.
And so you are basically confronted with something of your biases, as like because you're watching this kid and you're like, well, he's so sweet. Yeah. Look at him crying in this van. Like, look at his life ending right in front of his eyes. Like, he couldn't have done it, or maybe this is a mistake, or we're going to find out that this is a miscarriage of justice, and that's what this show is about. And it's not.
Well, let's think about what you said at the beginning, which is Jack Thorne's idea of the TV as an empathy box. And it doesn't mean, though, that it's just set up and you turn on the box. What it means is there are dials on it. Mm-hmm. And I think about those dials a lot, particularly when trying to wrap my head around the sort of soft power of TV creation. Yeah. And it's relevant for this. It's relevant in ways that we talked about last week with The Pit. And it's relevant with Severance, too, which is when you are in a creative space, like in a writer's room or planning a season or a series, you have all the answers. It is your job, you and your writing staff, or even your writing partner, or even if it's just one person, you know the whole story. And it is your job to know at 360 degrees, back to front, every detail, what people were thinking about, or what people might think about something, even if they're not on camera reacting to it. The really challenging part then, and this is especially true for mystery box shows or just mysteries, is how and when to reveal that information and how best to deploy it in the service of an engaging TV show, right? So you never want to give everything away, but there's so much power in, as Severance perhaps learned too well, withholding. And I think that this first episode is a masterclass in that for exactly the reasons you say. You are at once disoriented, but also in a very strange way, comforted by the guardrails of a system, of processes, of people who are reasonably kind to this kid because that is their job, right? To just be
I think that the kid is also
neutral, is sympathetic.
An empathetic character, yeah.
Yeah, and this kid, Owen Cooper is the actor.
Honestly, dude,
extraordinary.
Holy shit.
Extraordinary. Yeah, where do they find this kid?
I have no idea. But he's like what he does in 3, I'm like, is this what it's like to see, like a great actor who's going to be around for 30, 40 years?
This is like DiCaprio on Growing Pains.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, but he was really, really memorable. But anyway, do you get what I mean in the sense that it's not just so much work went into diagramming and choreographing the direction, the camera work in this first episode, but an equal amount of work appears to have been given towards the emotional load bearing and the revelation.
Yeah.
So that every step along the way, including these small moments that do stand out of like Stephen Graham grabbing the attorney and saying, I don't know what I'm doing here. I mean, and then the show constantly reminds us it's like 6:43 in the morning.
Yes.
Leading up to a moment of just a hammer dropping which is how that first episode ends.
Yes.
I thought it was masterful.
Yeah.
Masterful.
And even like then that moment between the father and the son where he at first is like basically turns his back on him and then finally is just like, well, we only have each other here, and there's like this embrace.
As someone, as Ashley Walters, who plays the DI, Luke Bascom, says, in the interview prior to that, all right, I get it. Everyone here is just trying to do the best job they can.
Yeah.
And that's all anybody's doing. I also found it, not to be too ripped from the headlines, I did find it, and this might unravel in future episodes, strangely comforting to be at sea with a system that appeared to be working. Just a working public system. Not saying that the police's case is airtight or whatever. I'm not commenting on that. But there was a public-facing responsibility presented by the cops, at least in the first episode, that I found very refreshing in a country where public-facing systems appear to be degrading.
Yeah.
Where they were like, in terms of like getting a lawyer, getting representation, explaining step by step, getting the cornflakes, which I did not know were called cornies.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that net, that safety net is not necessarily. I think when you start to find out more about why Owen may have become what he became, it's evident that the people who are trying to keep that safety net taut and keep people from falling through it are woefully understaffed and under-resourced. I want to talk more about this with you, so like we'll hit it. If not Wednesday, maybe we'll hit it next week. I really hope people watch it. It's just a really meaningful show to me. I think that there is something of a blast of fresh air because when you watch a lot of stuff that's asking you to infer human behavior, not infer human behavior, but infer like human drama from a distance because it's either high genre, like hard sci-fi, kind of a escapist fantasy, but it's also about class. And it's like, this is just literally about class, or it's about the pain we pass down through generations of families, or about whether or not people without fully developed brains should be exposed to the information that our kids are exposed to on their phones. And that kind of comes up in the second episode. It is like really kind of it was centering for me to realize like, oh, this is what this medium is capable of.
Yeah, and I think that it's an interesting debate, it's just an interesting ongoing conversation for our podcast right now, because we've been really obviously taken with the pit. We're very compelled by this show, and we've been talking about it in terms of industry sentiment.
Landman, we were obviously very taken by him.
By the way, I don't want to get off track here, but I did have a dream that there was a secret season finale of Landman that we hadn't talked about.
No, we didn't. We didn't miss it, man.
I may off mic have to tell you about what happened in this episode.
Well, did you see Sam Elliott's going to be in season 2?
Is he playing the same character he played in 1883?
I hope so.
Wait, before we get off track, which I'm eager to do, because by the way, it was renewed, right?
Of course it's renewed, yeah.
I know, but I thought that was a fait accompli, but it didn't get announced until this week. Anyway, we've been talking about it in terms of an industry story again and again about TV's retrenchment from some of the directorial or auteurist or cinematic ambition of the last decade and just like getting back to meat and potato storytelling. But that's not necessarily the whole story. Because I think that what we're really responding to when we see shows like The Pit, when we see shows like Adolescence, and even certain elements of something like Paradise, is I don't think it's. I'm not trying to lump them together.
I know. I mean, you're concerned about climate change.
What I'm trying to say is, it's not necessarily. It's just too easy to say, this is just a return to old-fashioned storytelling, basic storytelling, broadcast storytelling, middlebrow storytelling. I think that I am actually for a kind of turn back towards some engagement with whether it's social realism or the world as it is, as opposed to, boy, we really are in a dystopia or in a really sexy, incestuous fantasy, Guns and Dragons world or whatever. Like, I think that there's an element of it that is reminding us of the value of that kind of engaged storytelling. Being here now.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be misunderstood here. Like, the greatest examples of the shows of the last 10 years, there are human moments in all of them.
Yeah.
There's even a human moment that I found very moving in episode 9 of Severance from the season.
There you go.
And I'll got to keep listening to find out what it was. One. No, but
in 38 minutes.
But get ready, guys. No, but I do find that very exciting. And of course, the larger caveat, which is TV is enormous and it is capable of a lot of different types of storytelling. What's exciting about Adolescence, even more so than the shows we're mentioning, is that it is wildly ambitious in terms of subject matter, theme, emotion, tone, and filmmaking.
Yes. Yeah.
So
I'm just so happy that it's doing so well.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy that Netflix is I'm not trying to like glaze Netflix. It's just like, it's awesome that that's the number one show at Netflix right now.
Well, I tried to articulate this with Black Doves, and I don't know if I was ever successful in doing it, but I think that there is a way to engage with the parameters of Netflix's algorithm, with its priorities, and just with how it presents storytelling that is positive. It is not running from the next episode in 5 seconds. It is not running from the gourmet cheeseburger, let's be noisy, let's make a top 10 around the world. And what you're asking me about how the first episode of Adolescence ends, that's a really smart use of how Netflix is going to be presenting this show.
Yeah.
It is a quiet moment that is so devastating that you're almost too stunned to even hit stop. You need to keep going. And another good use of that is, again, I haven't seen them all yet, but I think the 4 episodes, nice.
Yeah. Well,
smart.
At the end of the first one, my wife and I were like, I think we need to watch With Love with Meghan Markle to like chill the fuck out.
Did you?
Yeah.
Did it give you hope that some people...
The first one is like literally something out of Mulholland Drive, but the
first episode of Meghan Markle?
I just felt like I was losing my mind watching Markle, but so we skipped to the Mindy Kaling episode.
And that grounded you?
I was more just like, honestly, like, I find this very soothing to watch this woman make a frittata.
I just thought you were pairing them in the sense that, like, boy, it seems rough in the English penal system. At least some good people can escape it.
Yeah.
At least there's a chance.
Let's talk about your fucking boy, Sam Rockwell.
Okay, so White Lotus episode 5.
Had been some talk about this is the one. Get ready.
But there was also rumors, right, that there was going to be a guest star. Where did this come from? And talk me through this.
Probably Prestige TV podcast. I think that they had maybe mentioned it. I don't know, but like I think that there had been some chatter that there were more cameos this season, and that we should be on the lookout for episode 5.
Okay. Great.
Okay.
You were on the lookout.
I was actually chatting with our producer Kaya before you got in. And let me just posit this to you. Was the Sam Rockwell scene in this new episode of White Lotus so good that it kind of cast the other parts of this season a little bit in a dimmer light, because it was like, oh, obviously everything has to have like dynamics where it goes quiet, loud, or whatever. But was this made me feel like I was like taking flight.
Yes.
You know what I mean? The show itself was actually going some profound place, not unlike some of the characters who are in Thailand looking for spiritual transcendence, looking for pure love, looking for whatever they're looking for. This show itself kind of shed some kind of, it's White Lotus. We're rich. We're hanging out at the pool. Like we're kind of getting fucked up and trying to heal ourselves. Like that thing. It was just an incredible piece of two people acting with one another.
Yes.
And an amazing piece of writing. But I actually thought quite profound when he's talking about, I wanted to be the lady fucking me, but be, like all that stuff actually like clicked for me. What'd you think?
How many Meghan Markles did you watch after that speech?
I'm actually referring to episode 5 of Meghan Markle.
I got to tune in.
Rockwell shows up.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm eager to talk about this with you because I thought this was a fascinating episode of TV, and particularly of the White Lotus. I thought it was a hugely disappointing episode.
Okay.
Except for that scene. So, first of all, let's just talk about that scene on its own first. That was really thrilling for it to be Rockwell in the lobby, just because those boys should always be together.
Sure.
Like those boys, like sometimes when you, especially with a guest star, even a slightly famous guest star, when they show up and you have to just assume a backstory.
There's a little Elliot Gould, George Siegel vibe to it.
1,000,000,000%. That is your cast for the California Split remake in Bangkok. And like those guys clearly have had some nights where they probably should have been drinking chamomile tea.
Yeah.
So that was thrilling and exciting. And it did feel like the show was finally elevating a little bit. I would also argue that the show felt like it was elevating a little bit when we saw the bright lights of Bangkok's Chinatown reflected in the taxi window with Walton Goggins in it, because Walton Goggins' story could have been a pretty good miniseries that is so far, even though nothing has happened in that story either, that storyline is head and shoulders above everything else on season 3 of The White Lotus.
Okay.
And it is a strange thing so far, again, not much has happened writ large, where one field trip storyline feels weighed down by the hotel. And that's my sort of perception of how the season is feeling. That scene was...
Does the White Lotus have a White Lotus hotel problem?
Look at that. God, you're so good at internet.
I still enjoy watching this show.
We'll get into the other plots.
Yeah, okay.
But this was one of those things where I'm like, yeah, Mike White cracked his knuckles and was like, I'm going to take a big bite out of all of this.
Yeah.
I'm going to give Rockwell something to do that Rockwell can do better than almost anyone. I'm going to give him a speech that is so long and so engaging and so deeply confusing that all I'm going to ask Walton Goggins to do is to just react. And both of them are at their best in doing it. And the weirdness of it and the heightened surreality of them being in a place we didn't know their relationship. We don't know and we kind of now know what Rick's doing there, and we could have guessed what was in the bag. But it gave...
I mean, after that Rockwell speech, who knows what's in the bag?
That's a great point. It just gave the show the kind of vertiginous, jet lag, smeary, what are we talking about and what are we looking for feeling that I think a show about people traveling, hiding or seeking is always in search of, and it was just killer. Just great actors, too, at the top of their game.
Do you think that the speech that he gives him, the anecdote or whatever, is it like an allegory for writing? You know, this idea of... Because I think a lot of this season has been about pushing excess to the point of like purification anyway. And it's interesting, different characters have different attitudes about what they're doing there and what kind of experience they want to have. I find it very fascinating that, you know, like as Saxon's father becomes essentially a lorazepam addict. Like he's like, my body's a temple, but then takes MDMA that night. But I was kind of going over the Rockwell speech in my head, and it is about disappearing into other people and somehow finding out something about yourself as you try on all these different identities and roles and feel different ways and being made to feel. And, you know, it not only is it funny and exciting and surprising, but it's so profound, I think. And I wonder whether somebody like, you know, writing can be very workmanlike, but writing can also hit this kind of like nirvana sometimes where you're like, yes, I've inhabited someone else here.
I think that's really, really smartly observed and really interesting, especially for a Mike White show, because I think that one of the things that is really appealing about his work generally is you can feel his good faith, earnest questing in everything that he does. He is working on himself through what he writes and what he's interested in exploring. And I think he probably has asked himself these questions at times, particularly with the enormous, you know, the brighter fame that he's gotten through The White Lotus, the brighter spotlight on him and his work, the greater opportunities, money, whatever, to explore and push what he's interested in, and that one of the things that he's interested in writing about people from different levels of society that are different from his own experience. So I think
probably why he likes playing Survivor.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I think that I think that's a very, very smart read of it. I also think, again, because I think that this is a artist who has been working on himself and working on stuff for decades, when I say that this season has been disappointing, I am not throwing out the whole project.
Sure.
I'm interested in it. And one of the things that makes me interested is what you just said, that if we think about the Sam Rockwell character as voicing some aspect of Mike White's creative psyche, which is just like, you know, I kept trying more and more extreme versions of, let's say, writing or story or plot. And in the end, I had to just sort of let go with all of it and sit with the problem, because that's, at the end of all of it, you're just left alone with yourself. Is that why this season feels so particularly stuck in neutral, where none of the characters have advanced at all outside of themselves in 5 episodes? Is that, in a sense, like a meta commentary on the project writ large? Because I was really, really surprised how completely devoid of tangible or compelling stakes this episode was, despite being intercut.
Well, despite there being
if,
a near suicide, we have a gun in the wild. We now have 2 guns in the wild.
Sure.
We have Belinda and Greg hunting one another, essentially.
Maybe, yeah.
Well, more or less, at least be aware of one another.
But her bigger peril this week was whether there was a lizard in her room.
Yes, but then there's also all this betrayal going on the island between, right? See,
yeah.
why are you shocked?
I guess.
But, yeah.
I mean, I found it. So, well, okay, I guess two things. We could go storyline by storyline, and we probably should talk about each one. But there's also, I think there might be another reason why it's feeling the way it's feeling this season, and we don't know this yet. 5 episodes out of how many?
I think it's like 9, isn't it?
I think it's 9, and I think that continues a trend of every season being a little bit longer than the previous season.
Mm-hmm.
I was shocked to remember. So 8. But yes, that is every season is 1 episode longer.
Okay.
I did not remember that the first season was 6 episodes and the second season was 7 episodes. The 5th episode of the second season was called That's Amore, and that's when Tom Hollander invites Tanya and Portia to Palermo. They're already out on the end game of that season, and I remember we were watching that episode and we were like, where are they going? What does this have to do with a larger story or the murder mystery from the beginning? But we felt some sense of momentum in it. This season has more episodes, and maybe these people and these moments deserve more time spent to live with them. But Piper telling her parents at dinner that she wants to do a gap year in a monastery near one of the most luxurious resorts in the world did not strike me as particularly compelling television. Now, Tim Ratliff is going through his own thing, so he's monosyllabic and has a gun in his pocket. Parker Posey did some of her best work so far in the series with her reactions and why would she want to live in Taiwan. But that ultimately did not strike me as that big of a deal, frankly, for a series. Similarly, these 3 women partying with some Russians, and are they going to hook up with them, or is Leslie Bibb going to do a shot or not? That wasn't that...
It's a very aesthetically pleasing night.
It's shot beautifully. It's intercut. There's a moon
party. I had a lot
party.
of fun watching the dancing, and I could see kind of like this should be in a normal or like stable group of friends. It's like let's get Lori like let's get her late. Like we got to have a fun night.
Sure.
We got to like go out. She needs a pick me up. We're in relationships, but she's divorced. Like let's go. And obviously Jacqueline needs to feed the beast when she's not getting attention from her partner back in the States and is suspecting him of, I guess, sort of cheating on him. I can't really...
Or just ghosting.
Yeah, like she's like, no, I need to be...
The star. Yeah, totally. But that dynamic...
I got it. I know how to watch TV.
Yeah, but also, we went out Saturday night. I know what it's like among friends
has one
in their
shot,
40s. Dude. What I mean is, those fault lines in that friend group have been static since they got off the boat.
Yeah, I think that's what you're reacting to, and I think it's what I'm reacting to. There's a certain stasis that even as the groups overlap, even as Saxon and Lachlan go hang out with Chelsea and Chloe, even as Jacqueline and Lori and Kate go out into town and with Valentine and his friends, that they remain the same.
Yeah, and there was no, like, I think that, so for example, it's, maybe, I don't know, is it useful or not to compare it to past seasons? But that episode 5 of season 2, the Harper, Ethan, Cameron, I mean, that plot line, I think that's the episode where they went out wine tasting. And again, there were 4 live wires in that group who could cross like a game of tic-tac-toe in any number of ways, and we didn't know which way it was going to play out. The 3 friends, those fault lines remain completely static. And had it been like, guess what? Lori is going to hook up with all 3 guys, or what's Leslie Bibb's character's name? Kate. What if she surprised the other 2 by coming out of her shell in a different way?
For Medicare for All.
It's good. You know what? She just thinks there are a lot of people at the Department of Education who... No, look, I think that could have been more compelling or more surprising. Now, I'm not telling Mike White how to do his job. This is clearly a choice. I'm going to throw out one concern troll that we'll revisit at the end of the season.
Okay.
the first 2 seasons of the show were written with enormous haste, time deadline, and production restrictions, particularly the first season. This season was delayed because of the strike, but also I think you could assume, even though he famously writes very fast, Mike White had more time for this season than any other season.
Okay.
Sometimes that's not a good thing. And then taking so much time on screen for some of these storylines might also not be the best thing. I don't know. The Rick and Chelsea storyline, I think, is the most compelling. They're now separate from each other. And Amy Lou Wood's face and her reactions so far, other than Walton Goggins, I think is the breakout star of this season. But her arc going...
Respectfully, I think it's Parker Posey's
fair.
Accent is the breakout star.
That's true. That was a hipster pick.
Yeah.
You know, as Sheil would say. But the Chelsea storyline being on this boat with these boys and doing ecstasy where fireworks go off is essentially one of like, oh, I'm worried. As she says, I'm worried about Rick.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I'll have a good time. But I'm worried. And that she's waiting for Rick to do something just like we're waiting for Rick to do something.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of anticipation. Would all of this go away if the Netflix button that said next episode in 5 seconds pop up? Is this season better paced for that? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that I would have to go back and do that overlay you just did with the first 2 seasons because it's been a while since I watched Hawaii, obviously, and I remember Italy quite clearly, but Italy also had just a lot more madcap shit happening. You know, it felt much more, I don't know, if scene to scene, there was more of vitality, and there's something a little bit like static. It's like what you're saying. It's not even the fault lines. It's even like, even though the filmmaking has been wonderful this season, and I actually really, I know, like, it's funny that you're like, oh, Chelsea and Rick are the breakout story, and I'm like, my actual interest is in Jacqueline, Kate, and Lori. Like, I'm fascinated by his portrayal of these quote unquote lifelong friends who obviously have a lot of like issues with one another. But I always leave episodes feeling like, what did I just? Was there not enough of one of these groups of people? It was also
quite long. I think maybe the way to articulate it is we, the audience at this point. And I think that you and I are particularly patient watchers of this show. Just as we've said many times, we like being on vacation.
People may disagree with that, but yeah.
But the audience, I think, writ large, is waiting for a shoe to drop, a revelation to happen, someone to be honest. But the characters are waiting for that too. Within the Ratliff family,
it's a cast. It's a group of characters waiting for a gun to go off.
See, it is. The audience and the characters shouldn't be waiting to find out who's shooting. You know, like Tim still hasn't
The best version of White Lotus is when you forget there's a body at all.
Well, yes.
You know what I mean?
I totally agree with that. And it's not
because that first season you're like, oh yeah, right. There's a body getting loaded into but who cares? This is so incredible.
Peel off certain characters that I do feel warmly towards and I'm interested in from this episode. Guy talks during this episode as he finds out a gun is stolen. He has access to England's CCTV system and sees that Tim has the gun. He lurks around, sweats, waits, says, I think you have something that I lost. And Tim says, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's Guy Talk's arc this episode.
Yeah.
Tim's arc is, I have a gun in my pocket. My daughter wants to do a gap year. I think I might kill myself. I'm not going to.
Oh, he gets interrupted.
And I still don't tell anyone anything. I mean, Jason Isaacs is doing so much with so little. It is a pretty incredible performance. And his breakdown, which he then immediately retracts about being like, there's so many expectations on me. No, I'm sorry, is so fantastically delivered.
Do you feel that way?
The two, every Monday at 10 a.m., yes.
When you fire up Adolescence.
When I watch the show you wanted me to watch over the weekend right before sitting down with you. No, like, I'm eager, regardless of what happens plot-wise, when Jason Isaacs and Parker Posey get a, like, let's clear the decks here scene, I'm psyched. When they do their version of Streetcar or whatever that it's going to look like, can't wait. That's on tap. We know that. But in terms of like delivering on promise, I mean, I guess we get some brothers kissing, which, you know, you and I are fascinated by. Yeah. We're always interested on, as you said, how things...
So that's how they do things in that family.
The two only children are just Principal Ed Rooney watching White Lotus season after season. But even, you know, that was all foreplay. It was all build up, not just between the brothers, but I mean, between the four of the people on the boat. They want to have fun. Gary's capable of killing someone. Belinda is just waiting for that shoe to drop one way or another.
Well, for her son to arrive. But yeah, it seems like Belinda, that's a good example. Belinda's arc as far as like, I'm here to learn more about the healing processes that you guys employ here so that I can bring them back to Hawaii seems to have somewhat fallen by the wayside although
she's getting some healing.
It could be physician heal thyself. You know what I mean? Or healer heal thyself.
I was happy that she got that.
Let's do Severance really quickly. Obviously the finale airs Thursday. I don't know that we will be talking about the finale on our Thursday show. So people have to wait for a few days.
Because we have to record early this week.
And I know you guys can't wait. I know you guys are just like, these dudes.
Another week of my friends talking about my friends.
Still are just like, when is the watch going to come out?
We couldn't be more rowdy.
You said that there was one moment in this episode of Severance that touched you.
Mm-hmm.
What was it?
When the credits rolled. Okay, no. I there's no reason to be snarky here. I really like the Zach Cherry Merritt Weaver scenes.
I did not.
Well, good. Let's have a little conflict. We're two Lachlan and Saxon. You know what I mean? Just I like, because I kind of didn't like. I have a larger criticism of it, but what I liked in the Merritt Weaver. Let me just leave it at the Merritt Weaver part. I like that she is playing a real person who is, through her face and her performance, reacting to the emotional truth of an insane world.
Does it bother you that Merritt Weaver seems to be a real person, and then when
no one else
go
is?
To the train station, everybody is dressed like it's Mad Men?
Yes. Everything else bothers me at this point.
What is the disconnect there? Like, what is that to me is something that I feel like I need to go to a cognitive behavioral therapist about, because for some reason, like, that's been screaming in my head.
The train station stuff?
Since I watched this episode. The fact that there are certain elements of this show that seem to exist in a recognizable reality to ours, but with like this subterranean
increasingly
part.
Fewer.
But
yes.
then when Irving and Bert go to the train station, it seems to be taking place in like a 1950s folky, everybody's here at the Utica train station, you know, like.
Also,
am I wrong? Did you notice that?
Yes.
Yeah.
And in both of those scenes, though, there also felt like a couple scenes got cut or missing.
Well, I think that's what I'm reacting to with the Dylan plot.
Yeah, that
is that he just keeps walking into rooms and being like, "What the fuck? Fuck you."
Which one? Which Dylan?
Any Dylan seems to be doing that.
Yes, but also he's now just fully in love with a person he's met twice, and then is willing to kill himself over it, right? And quit
metaphorically. Yeah.
Now I don't want to I don't want to make like a bad faith argument here. Like, I'm sure they had many vibrant writers' room discussions, and it very well may be that there were no more scenes to play out because of the construction of the show. Like, they're just going to be sitting in that aquarium room again. Like, there's no what other beats
Andy,
are there to play?
Why aren't they working? Like, I know
they don't work anymore.
I don't mean to sound like an asshole.
Hit me,
but
I love it when you do.
Let's just say whatever Cold Harbor is, which we have like. Let's just say it's a code that they're finishing to resurrect or clone people or transfer consciousness into other people, whatever it is. And it's apparently has a deadline, as we find out in the beginning of this episode.
The momentous
it's like,
day.
Hey, it's the day. Today is the day. And we haven't had Mark in the office in several days. Dylan seems to be primarily interested in taking advantage of what was supposed to be a like, hey, great job. We think you've got a lot of potential here. Because of that, we're going to offer you this privilege that other people don't get. That seems to have completely waylaid or destroyed him. He's now alone and decides to quit. So Dylan has quit. Helly is now back on her revolutionary shit and running around, never is in the computer area.
No.
It's staffed by Milchick, who is now like also rebelling against the management, and Miss Huang, who he sends away. There's Drummond, who seems to be the only person in charge of security in all of Lumen, even though they have this massive complex building.
Yeah, there are only 6 people there.
Yeah, like what? I just don't understand. Like, I think that there's like a practical thing that bothers me about like if these people are living under the authoritarian thumb of this faceless corporation that's doing evil shit, why can they get away with so much stuff?
So this is me doing my best Emperor Palpatine, saying, good, good. Let it flow through you. It's freeing. There's so much power on this side. The other scene that I semi-enjoyed was Milchick and Drummond for one reason alone, because it was the only moment in this entire episode when a character was honest with another character. Yeah. And he said, eat shit. And he couldn't even say that directly at first. Otherwise, and those are two good actors who are playing a scene strongly. Otherwise, the entire episode is just a series of obfuscations and
all
frustrations.
The stuff of waiting in the woods. No, we have to wait until night, but we're not going to talk at all. But Devin is completely bought into what Cavell is. Yeah.
The realignment will happen suddenly, except it won't. That was 3 episodes ago. It'll happen in the finale. So there are 2 scenes. I know we're pressed for time, and we actually apparently do have something to say about this episode that I think highlight my struggles with this. And look, we've talked about it for weeks. We'll talk about it in the finale. There are just baked in construction issues that they've had to deal with. And one of them is there is nowhere for that first season to go if they are being monitored 24/7. Then those any characters are completely in handcuffs. So they had to come up with hall passes, and then Mark doesn't show up for work, and then Helly's a revolutionary, and there's a child. Or we just stop paying attention to their expectations, because otherwise there's nothing for them to do within the structure that they created for themselves. These are corners that they creatively and ambitiously painted themselves into that they've done a lot of work clearly to try and undo. And that's a tough place for any show to be in, particularly going into a second season. But there are 2 scenes in particular that kind of summed it up for me. One is we drive into the yet another frozen wilderness to meet with Cobell, who... This is a moment when they could actually ask each other any number of questions, and they don't, because this is a television show that needs to hold on to its secrets until the finale. Fine, we get it. We've bought our ticket for the ride. What is the most fascinating, hammer-dropping piece of information delivered in that scene? It is Cobell saying Cold Harbor is the case. Who does that land with? The audience of Severance. Not Mark.
Well, Mark presumably would be like, isn't that the name of the thing I've been working on?
If that was any Mark... But it's not.
Right.
That's outie Mark.
Right.
Those words are meaningless to anyone who's not a fan of the show Severance. And that's who that scene was talking to.
Yeah.
That's really frustrating on a character emotional level. The other thing I would want to point to was the cold open, the ice cold open.
Oh, the egg.
So again, I'm never criticizing the show for its aesthetics because it is beautiful, the production design, the direction, all as high as it gets on television. So we see Helly swimming in laps in an indoor pool. I guess what we've learned from that is that she's fit aerobically. Okay. She goes upstairs and she has a very odd breakfast with her father, who lives in a big mansion, and she cuts an egg on a very stylized plate and eats the whites. Now, there's been enough egg stuff and fertility stuff to suggest that there's a lot of baby stuff in whatever the...
Sure. We end this episode at a birthing center.
Yes, and we're ending at a birthing center, and so that is on some level that's the thought area where this show is going, where the secrets are, right? Presumably, and it increasingly heavy-handedly so. We then hear in the way that these weirdo people talk to each other that it's a momentous day, and he wishes his daughter ate eggs raw, and then we pull back and dramatically learn that the owner of Lumen lives in a big mansion, and it's snowy there, and there's a water tower. Tell me if I'm wrong. What other information was given in this scene? What was the purpose of this incredibly
Well, I guess that he
lives
with his daughter, because I think that the more important part happens towards the end when he comes downstairs, and there's an indication where it was the implication to me was that we are not certain which Helena or Helly is in the basement that day, or is in the facility that day. That it's Helly is acting like
because you have the scene with Dylan where he's like no one could tell.
Yeah, well, and also just the fact that she tries to use her dual identity against Milchick.
Yes,
and her father seems so like. What if Helly is actually like? What if they're severing people going out rather than coming in?
Whoa,
yeah. Think about that shit.
I appreciate that.
That's
that point. But do you get what I mean in terms of...
I completely understand.
Yes, the show is paced and tonally presented as if it's the fucking Book of Revelations.
Well, as Elvis Costello would say, all this useless beauty.
Wow. Look at you. I did wonder... I mean, TV can be weird when you have these weird like synchronicities that definitely are not intentional and are not speaking to each other. When there's the Bert and Irving scene, and it made me think of Say Nothing. Just like Dolar's driving people.
Yeah.
I can't tell you where you're going.
It also made me think of Yellowstone taking people to the train station.
But like, again, that scene is banking on our emotional investment in different versions of these men. And then it's sort of smearing it. The suggestion is that Bert knows more about the company, understands that they were in love, potentially. But either, I mean, it could be that I'm not doing my best job watching this, or it could just be that there were scenes missing that could have helped buttress this, but there weren't time for them. Did anything in this episode, I'm going to turn it back to you before we get out of here. Did anything in this episode, which I think is broadly being received as kind of like a, whoa, are they running out of time? Are they setting things up for the finale? This is not where you want to be for the penultimate.
I think my hope for this...
Did anything hit you emotionally in this episode?
Not emotionally, but I do hope that what we get is an reintegrated Mark so that we can have like a POV character who is essentially the same person. I know that goes against the sort of premise of the show, but I think to your point about things only mattering to the audience and not to the characters, that has sort of lost its impact for me. So it would be a lot more interesting if this detective scout goes back into the world that he wants so desperately to leave on the inside of Lumen to find to try and find Gemma. But that is literally the only thing. I don't really know, nor do I particularly care what Cold Harbor is. There's not really a likelihood that they're going to come up with an explanation for what Lumen is doing that cooks my pasta so bad that I'm like, damn, I was wrong about this show.
I'm going to just double down on what I said last week, which is I think that the labor, no child birthing center, pun intended, of this season does seem set up to destroy the restrictions of the paradigm that they established in season 1, because they cannot make a show
about people sitting at computers.
That is upstairs, downstairs,
exactly.
Different people sitting at computers. They're going to break those walls and ceilings down. And that is why we're also seeing hero redemptive narrative arcs for Milchick and for Cobell, and that it is going to be
us versus them
on a different, literally, level than we've seen it before, which could have better creative returns. I'm open to that.
Let's see what they wrap it up with. Andy, it's great to see you today.
Crazy. Thanks for making me watch TV.
Thursday, we're going to be talking about The Pit and some Philly shows. Deli Boys, Long Bright River, and Dope Thief are all out. Maybe Andy will watch some more Adolescence. It sounds like he's got a full work week for himself.
I've got a busy week.
Thanks to Kai, thanks to CT. We are out of here. Talk to you soon.